lactic acidosis. Sugars are high, diabetic ketoacidosis. Creatinine is high, renal failure. If lactate is not high, sugar is not high, this, I think of alcohol intoxication. He may be smelling of alcohol. And if he's not smelling of alcohol, salicylate intoxication. Have you understood? Paracetamol can also cause this. I saw one patient nurse in Fortis Hospital, and she came into the ICU with severe breathlessness, and everyone said it's a psychiatric problem. She has 2-3 admissions with breathlessness. They're hale and hearty. So I asked her what happened. She says, sir, whenever I get cold, running nose, next day I become very breathless. So I said, what do you take? She said, I take a Crocin, paracetamol. And we did a blood gas and bicarbonate was 12. So I told the hospital, I said, bicarbonate of 12 cannot be malingering. And that was due to paracetamol, causing, even a single tablet can cause it. I won't tell you how, but I've seen at least 4 or 5 cases so far of a single tablet of paracetamol causing unexplained metabolic acidosis. But if you have normal anion gap, the diagnosis is usually not obvious. If there is diarrhea, it's obvious. If the patient is receiving a lot of saline, hyperchloremia is easy to understand. But otherwise, you have to do more tests for normal anion gap, because RTA you cannot pick up. Renal tubular acidosis you cannot pick up. What happened? I think there's something, that error it was showing. Okay, what do you do is, this is when you, I think the computer has become fully automatic. It is going at its own pace. Technology is like a girl from Bombay. It will ditch you at the last moment. Like technology is not ditching me. Alright? It's going at its own pace. I am not controlling anything. See, it's going somewhere. At least the technology is tired. You're not tired. I appreciate that. I don't know what to do, because it's, maybe one of your remotes is causing this problem. So someone is having a remote there. I think I'll just use manually and forget the audience response. When you have a normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, the cause is not obvious. Forget the audience response. Okay, what I will do is, I will try to control this beast if I can. You must do sorry my friends. Just one thing. When you have a normal anion gap metabolic acidosis and the cause is not obvious, do urine electrolytes. Urinary anion gap is urinary sodium plus urinary potassium minus urinary chloride. I know you may say that we don't do it here, but trust me, every word that I am uttering here since I have come here is what we do every day in the bedside. If you can do serum electrolytes, you can do urine electrolytes. It's the same way. Only thing is, urinary potassium measurement, the pathologist has to use urine potassium diluting fluid and measure it. It's the same analyzer, same everything that is to be done. Now when you do this, you can get a positive urinary anion gap or negative value. So urinary sodium plus urinary potassium minus urinary chloride is either a positive figure, so 15, 20 like that, or minus 10, minus 20. If it is a minus figure, the cause is GI, fistula somewhere inside. And if it's positive, it's renal tubular acidosis. Okay? And if you have renal tubular acidosis, look at the urine pH. A urine pH more than 6 means type 1 RTA. Urine pH less than 5.5 can be type 2 or type 4. Look at the serum potassium. If the serum potassium is high, it's type 4. If it is normal, it is type 2. Why is it important to diagnose this? Because it's common in the hospital, RTAs, renal tubular acidosis. The treatment depends on what type it is. A type 1 RTA, which is distal RTA, okay, irrespective of the bicarbonate value, you have to give soda bicarb. Whereas type 2, which is proximal RTA, you give soda bicarb only if the serum bicarbonate is less than 15. Important. Type 4 RTA is important because you need to treat with fludrocortisone. Alright? So that is why it is important to pick up these disorders. I don't know what to do with this technology problem. It's I told you normal anion gap is 12, right? This is again the single most important mistake that physicians make all over the world. They compare it with 12. The reality is 12 is okay for you and me sitting here or outpatient patient, but in the ICU or a critically ill patient, the anion gap is not, normal anion gap is not 12. It can be 6, it can be 18, and you have to compare with that. How do you find out what is expected anion gap? For expected anion gap, you have to use a formula where you say 12 you start with, but correct for albumin, correct for pH. Now, the correction for albumin is that if your albumin falls, your anion gap falls. If albumin falls by 1, your anion gap falls by double the amount, so 2. If albumin increases, your anion gap increases. So that's one thing. Second is pH. If there is acidosis, your anion gap drops by 2. And if there is alkalosis, it increases by 4. These are numbers which you have to remember. You can write them down. But it gives you a value. Now the important thing is, if you take 12 as a reference and your patient has a value of 16, you may say high anion gap, and therefore you will start looking at lactic acidosis, alcohol intoxication, like that. Or, but if your expected is 18, then 16 is not high. Have you understood this? And therefore it becomes a renal tubular acidosis and you're thinking of lactic acidosis. On the other hand, your anion gap comes to be something like 8, and you feel, oh, it's normal. Up to 12 is normal. But this patient has metabolic acidosis, has got hypoproteinemia, and expected anion gap may be 6. 8 becomes high. So you have to always, it's not enough to calculate the anion gap, also compare it with what is expected, and that's what you need to do. Is there any solution to this problem? Slides are not moving forward and backward. No, it's not coming. Something is. Close the programming, we'll start it again. While it's boosting, I'll tell you a joke. We were having this training program which some of you were talking about, 3-day crash course in Bombay. Did you do that? It's, believe me, this 3-4 hours, imagine whole of medicine being discussed, every aspect, how to talk to patient, how to read x-rays, everything we do like this. Next day, I find that one of the lady doctors from consultant from Lucknow, She was looking at very tired. She was looking very tired. So I asked her, you slept, aren't you feeling well? She said, I couldn't sleep whole night. There was a nightmare. So what was the nightmare? She said, my nightmare was when I was turning to the right side, there was metabolic acidosis. I would turn to the left, metabolic alkalosis. Whole night I was balancing pH. So this side, oh, acidosis ho gaya. Then she like this side, oh, alkalosis ho gaya. So that's how toxic you can become by listening to these lectures. Our ECG lectures are also very much in depth. Once at a similar meeting, we are having lunch, and this doctor is just standing there like this. So we said, what happened? Why are you just standing? So he said, ECG ka curry kyun hai ye? It was an egg curry, EGG, egg curry. I said, ECG curry? What is this? He had that much of a thought block. I'll do it this one. It never happens like this. Lecture like 5 times a week. Doesn't say, not a stress. Okay, now we've simplified the technology, nothing will go wrong. So how do you do this corrected Anand gap? Look at this. Now suppose a patient with nephrotic syndrome is there, albumin is 2. So what will I expect Anand gap? From 12, albumin from 4 has fallen to 2, so it has fallen by 2. My Anand gap will fall by double that amount, 4. So I expect it becomes 8. Now suppose patient is volume depleted, albumin is 6. My expected Anand gap will be, albumin has gone up by 2, so plus 4, 16. Now suppose there is a patient with acidosis and alkalosis, and acidosis decreased by 2, alkalosis increased by 4. You got to just by heart these. Patient has contraction, metabolic alkalosis, pH is 7.5, albumin is 5. What will I do? Start with 12, alkalosis add 4, 1 gram is increased, so plus 2, it becomes 18. That's how I have expected, and actually I need to compare with that value. I told you compensation for metabolic acidosis and alkalosis equal in half the time. Respiratory disorders, people find it confusing because it's different from acute and chronic. I want you to remember this. First of all, when you talk about metabolic, we said fall in bicarbonate, and that should be equal. For respiratory disorders, you say fall of 10 as one basic unit. So, and remember this chart, you make this in your mind, acidosis, alkalosis on above, acute chronic on the side, write 1, 2, 3, 4. What it means is in respiratory acidosis, an increase in PCO2 by 10 will cause an increase in the bicarbonate by 1. Respiratory alkalosis, fall by 10 will cause a fall by 2. In chronic, instead of 1 it will become 3 and here it will become 4. Have you understood this? I will repeat this. In respiratory disorders, a change in 10, so normal PCO2 is 40. If it changes to 30, that's a respiratory alkalosis, right? So you will come here, respiratory alkalosis. If it's acute from 40 to 30, my bicarbonate will fall by 2, from 24 will become 22. But if it's chronic respiratory alkalosis, it will fall by 4, so it will become 20, from 24 to 4 by 4. In respiratory acidosis, suppose the patient comes to you with a PCO2 of 60. From 40 it has become 60, it is increased by 20. Each 10 is 1 unit, so 20 becomes 2 units. If it's acute, it will be 1 plus 1, 2 times, so 2 bicarbonate will become 24 plus 2, 26. If it's chronic, it will become 3 plus 3, 6, it will become 30. That's how you decide on compensation for respiratory disorders. Want to solve? Forget the solving a question. Now, sometimes if you take a patient like this, 45-year-old female on ventilator post laparotomy, same which we had seen, PCO2 75. Can you tell me if this is acute or chronic? Now, from 40 it has become 75, so 3.5 units, 35 to 3.5. If it is acute, my bicarbonate should increase by 3.5, so 24 plus 3.5, 27.5. Whereas in chronic, it will be about by 10, 24 to 34 seems okay. So if you do mathematics, it fits in with chronic. But I told you, never look at the blood gas without looking at the history. Patient comes, has had a laparotomy, comes to the ICU, 1 hour later you do this. How will it become chronic? On ventilator, which idiot will allow PCO2 to become 70 and not bother in the ICU? Whether it's a physician, intensivist, anesthetist. So this has to be acute. Acute only explains increase from 24 to 27 and a half. What? From 27 to 34, it's more than expected compensation. So there has to be metabolic alkalosis. What is causing the metabolic alkalosis? Hypovolemia. Is it uncommon post-laparotomy? No. Hypokalemia. Is it uncommon post-laparotomy? No. Continuous nasogastric rise tube aspirate post-laparotomy. That can also cause metabolic alkalosis. So this patient actually has metabolic alkalosis due to hypovolemia, hypokalemia plus an acute respiratory acidosis. That's how you always take the history into consideration before making a diagnosis. And probably the last thing that I want to explain to you. Let's put all these bottles so you know how much water I am drinking. What happened? Now see this. How we become Sherlock Holmes and detectives. The blood gas should have a bicarbonate of 24, normal. I see a report, bicarbonate is 10. That's all I know, bicarbonate is 10. My question is, how did it come to 10? One possibility is, some disease occurred, like renal failure, and brought the bicarbonate to 10. Simple metabolic acidosis. Remember this as type A. This patient actually started with normal, vomited, so vomiting causes metabolic alkalosis. So bicarbonate actually went up to 32. Vomited, becoming hypovolemic shock. Okay, BP fell. And then by lactic acidosis developed, hypovolemic shock came down to 10. Also possible. Third possibility is he developed a disease like DK which brought it to 18. We treated it with lot of saline, so hyperchloremia caused normal anion gap also, it came down to 10. So now all we know is it is 10. We don't know whether it followed this path, or this path. Here it is simple metabolic acidosis. Here it is metabolic acidosis with hidden metabolic alkalosis. Here it is metabolic acidosis with hidden normal anion gap acidosis. Okay. You do this only when you have a high anion gap, and you can, how can you find out which group it is? If I could somehow go back in time and find out before 10, which was the value just before 10. If it was 24, there is no disorder. More than 24 is hidden metabolic acidosis. Less than 24 is normal anemia. Easy? So you want to learn the magic of how to pick up where it was. We call that corrected bicarbonate. You take the bicarbonate that is in the report and add to that something called delta anion gap, which is the difference between calculated anion gap and expected anion gap. Suppose anion gap is 10, expected anion gap 6, delta is 4. Take 4, add it to the 10 and you will get the value. So that's how you get. If you get 24 corrected bicarb, there is no other disorder. More than 24 is hidden metabolic alkalosis. Less than 24 is hidden normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. And there are various exercises, we won't go into that. So this is how you approach acid-base disorders. Now we're only left with a few exercises. I can tell you what it. Anyone would like to attempt something like this? A 36-year-old patient admitted with palpitation, not on any medications. There's hypokalemia. Okay. Now, what is the most likely reason for this picture? Anyone? So there's hypokalemia with metabolic acidosis. This will turn out to be renal tubular acidosis. Okay. Metabolic alkalosis is very simple. There are only two possibilities: fluid responsive, fluid unresponsive. Do the urinary chloride. If it is less than 20, it is hypovolemia. You need to give fluid. And if it is not less than 15, it's more than 20, then it is due to hypokalemia. And we did in the morning how you approach hypokalemia, and you can work up and figure out the causes. Last question. We'll end at this. This is a common sense question. Suppose, now I want all of you to imagine you're the treating doctor. Elderly man with ischemic heart disease and bad pulmonary edema comes to the hospital. He is treated by the cardiologist and the ICU with aggressive diuretics. With lot of difficulty, they make him better. The lungs are now, the Krebs have reduced. But what has happened, because of a lot of diuresis, he's got metabolic alkalosis. Bicarbonates have gone up to 44. And what happens when there is metabolic alkalosis? Compensation is by respiratory acidosis. How do you get respiratory acidosis? Respiratory depression. So now what's happening is his PCO2 started to climb up. He had cardiac failure and now you're adding respiratory failure to it. So what is the correct treatment at this stage? Should you put the patient on spironolactone? Should you give acetazolamide? Should you restart saline to correct the contraction alkalosis? Or should you put the patient on dopamine? Any thoughts? How many of you work in the ICU? So it's fair for all. I mean, I'll tell you, it's a tough question. But it's a common sense question. And I want to bring out some point in discussion. Who would like to be sporting enough and just answer? Yes. You'd like to start dopamine, all right? Anyone else? Saline, all right? Saline. Anyone else? Okay, majority of you said saline. I'll tell you, this is a common. People ask me why I've succeeded in critical care is because, you see, what appears obvious sometimes is the most foolish decision you can make. If you start this patient on saline, basically the problem was dehydration. And if you start with saline, that fellow is going to say, Itna mushkil se I've treated the pulmonary edema and now you're giving lots of fluid and pushing him back into pulmonary edema. So what should you die of? Respiratory failure or cardiac failure? Do you understand? You're pushing him back into pulmonary edema. That's not acceptable. People will not refer you cases if you're going to give fluids to this patient. So that is out. Dopamine. How will dopamine help in this situation? Beg your pardon? Dopamine will never improve respiration, and it is, if you see dopamine low dose like this is dead, gone, never ever talk about it. Lots of problems, gut ischemia, translocation occurring, increasing oxygen consumption, etc. No, that's wrong. Most people would, so you've got to decide between spironolactone and acetazolamide. You have to give a diuretic, but you cannot accept a metabolic alkalosis. So you want to use something that causes metabolic acidosis. You know that acetazolamide, Diamox, causes metabolic acidosis. but it causes also hypokalemia, and the potassium is already low. Whereas potassium sparing diuretic is a diuretic, but will also prevent your potassium being lost. So the correct treatment here, surprisingly, is spironolactone. Have you understood? It is very tempting to treat what was the cause. The culprit is diuretics. Okay? Contraction closer. But this is just a thought that critical care is about really thinking and understanding and mastering a situation and not knee-jerk reaction. Saline is the commonest answer, but it's a knee-jerk reaction. This caused it, reverse it. But sometimes you got to think around it. So I will end here. Okay, we will probably just end the acid-base problem here, and I can hand the mic back to the organizers.
Thank you so much, sir, for raising the bars of our knowledge. I request Dr. T.C. Rathod, sir, to felicitate Dr. P.K. Jain, sir, with memento.
Can you just collect the handsets? Now these handsets are of no use. Your TVs will not work with them. Plus, you have entered your name with the handset, so we'll always know where you live and where the handsets are. Can you please collect the handsets so we have them back?
The Juventus Committee's pharmaceuticals want to speak something. Please wait for 5 minutes.
I want to personally thank Juventus. I'll tell you one thing. They're very, very good people in education and critical care. They've been with us for 8 to 10 years. And they know that I was unwell. And the only reason I came here is one, love for you. And second is because Juventus are good people and good friends.
So kind of you, Dr. Jain, the President, Secretary, the organizing committee of Rapicom. Really we are thankful to you. I carry a lot of greetings, good wishes to all the members, and I always want to see that this grows. Because almost throughout the India, I see a lot of PCM meetings and all, and we participate. But I'm very happy that Vidarbha has also started it. And one thing personally I feel, sir, everyone is sitting here, this is a very critical care is a segment I always feel. The more you know, it will help with this 140 crore population of India. That is one reason always we have gone for a CCF, that is critical care formation course with Dr. Jain. And I am always behind him to see at least 3-4 programs we do in a year. So at least we are educating some doctors, those who really treat the mass of India today. And sir, it is a knowledge which nobody can take, and it is Juventus felicitate it to get it. We always see that we bear everything, we don't spend anything. But only thing we see that at least you pass on to the medical colleges, rural areas, where a lot of constants are there. Yesterday when I coming with Dr. Jain, I was telling, sir, you are in Bombay, you see everything in the left stature, you get it. But a physician in a rural India, say it is a Bihar or UP or a remote part of Chhattisgarh, Orissa, or in Vidarbha, he is a neurologist, he is a GP, he is a gynecologist, he doesn't have a saline proper, or he is worked in such a crisis. So at least this can help them to save millions of lives. Because it is in between 19 and 20, your decision either 5% or a glucose, that creates this differences. So sir, it is, I'm really happy to be associated with the Physician of India, of Vidarbha. At the same time, I'm always thankful to Dr. Jain because he got lot of assignment, but still I say no, sir. At least this year, 60 people will this year will do it. And it is from the day one of Juventus is with us. And I always wish he is to grow, and at the same time, all will be benefited will be given, sir. Again, thank you very much. Any sort of help from my side, Juventus side, sir, always there. for the vision of India, especially for this region. Thank you very much, sir.
I request everybody to join for high tea arranged just outside, and the dinner is arranged at IMA Hall at 8 p.m. Thank you.
Virus is thing, I think. Something. I don't know virus. Virus.